We welcome back to the show in studio Senate Majority Leader Jack Johnson.
Hey, Jack. Good to be with you again. Thanks for having me.
You're on Super Talk TV, Jack. You know that,
wow.
right?
That light is a little intimidating. I love the backdrop, by the way. It's the first time I've been in since that's all.
I think you've had a conversation with a mutual friend about something that she and I talked about several days ago that we'll just... We won't talk too much about it, but we'll just put it'll put the icing on the cake.
I hope to have been able to deliver that today. It's not quite ready.
Okay.
But it will be soon. Will be soon.
We will let the audience in on it as soon as we can. What is the biggest thing going on this week on the Hill?
When you really think about substance and affecting people's lives and dollars involved, it's the Traffic Modernization Act. I mean, that's one of the biggest things this General Assembly has taken up in a lot of years. We're talking billions of dollars. We're talking roads, interstates, something that affects everyone. I heard you guys talking earlier about people driving slow in the left-hand lane, which drives me crazy. And we do have laws on the books against that. But no, that's a biggie, and it is progressive. We've passed it in the Senate, and I think the House will have it on the floor.
Is that what we're calling the choice lane bill?
Yeah.
Now?
Yeah.
I mean,
it's officially because it does a lot of other things. It has to do with making sure electric vehicle owners are paying something into the gas tax fund, right? Streamlining the process of how we design and build and do environmental studies for roads. So making all that more efficient, being able to get projects done quicker. And then certainly there is the element of the choice lanes.
The biggest criticism in this conversation that I have heard, and I don't want to speak to it, I want you to speak to it, is it's taxation. I don't want my taxes going up.
Sure.
How do you respond?
Well, that's why the governor proposed this, because it's not a tax. A tax is something the government makes you pay. You don't have a choice whether to pay sales tax. You don't have a choice whether to pay business tax if you own a business. That's why we refer to them as choice lanes. We're going to add capacity to our interstate, the most congested interstate facilities around Middle Tennessee, around Knoxville, maybe in Memphis, and we're going to add capacity that will be an option for drivers to use. And if you don't ever get in one of those choice lanes, you'll never pay for the upkeep or to build that choice lane. You're paying gas tax, and you're paying that now, and I'm paying that now for our existing road system, and you'll continue to pay that and use those other lanes there. So no, I don't consider it a tax. I don't consider it to be double taxation.
Oh, where is it? You just mentioned this. Where's the bill?
It passed overwhelmingly in the Senate. I think the vote was 26-6, and with one member absent. And it is in House Finance full committee and will be on the floor probably next week.
Before we get too far away from it, I do want to bring up, and it's kind of it's an issue that at least unless some other news comes out about it, it is to bed, so to speak, and that is the Lieutenant Governor Randy McNally and some of his well-documented social media issues. The Senate this week took a vote of confidence or no confidence, depending on your point of view. And I think it was, 19-7?
That's correct.
Is that right?
That's correct.
It was, I've said from the beginning that I think the voters of Senator McNally's district will determine for themselves how long they wish him to serve in that capacity. But it's up to you guys in the Senate to determine how long he serves as lieutenant governor. That's fair, right?
It is, absolutely.
And did he ask for the vote?
He did. Yeah, he requested the vote. Now, to be clear, there were some members who went to him and requested that he conduct a vote, and he listened to those, and he felt that was the right thing to do. So he called for the vote. We had a call, members of Senate leadership had a call with him on Saturday, and he said, I want to know where the body is, and I want you to conduct a vote.
I look at what we do as sort of a voice of the people, and I think you probably look at what you do in the same capacity, but we're probably coming at it from two different ways. It struck me as odd that it was a secret ballot. And the reason is the voters do not get to have a say in who is their lieutenant governor outside of what their senators say about who is their lieutenant governor. And I think the voters maybe would want to know where their senators stand on these individual issues. What say you about that?
Well, I think that's very fair. I think it's fair, but I do want to give you some context. The lieutenant governor requested that it be via a secret ballot so that members could vote their conscience. And, it's a tough decision because we love this man. Let me be very clear. I mean, Randy McNally is one of the finest people I've ever known. He's got a 40-plus year career of distinguished service in our state. This social media activity, I can't explain it, and it was embarrassing for the state. I acknowledge that. It seemed to be very out of character for him. Having said that, though, with the context and the relationships that we have, he wanted members to be able to express themselves, and privately and to be able to do that. I think it's entirely fair if people want to ask how their representative voted. And the other thing I would say about it is this was not an official act of the General Assembly. It was not a vote to remove him. It wasn't. That would take a public vote on the Senate floor with all members. This was more he wanting to get a feel for where the caucus was. Some members had expressed their opinions to him face to face or on the phone, one-on-one, and he's obviously spoken with every member. And the other thing is that it's consistent with our Senate rules relative to elections of leadership. When we have an election to elect the majority leader, which I am, and I was contested the first time I ran, and that vote was via secret ballot. Members vote by secret ballot. When we nominate our candidate as the Republican caucus to be lieutenant governor, that is done via secret ballot as well.
I don't mean to be obtuse, but why? Why do you do it that way? Outside of shielding that vote from the public?
Well, I think that's a fair question. The vote to actually elect the individual, so if there's a Republican candidate for speaker that's going to be held on the Senate floor, or if there's a vote to and there's a Democratic candidate, and that's a roll call vote on the Senate floor. But the caucus elections have, I hate giving this kind of an answer, but it's the way they've always done it, and the House does it that way too. So maybe we should look at opening.
Well, no, look, at the end of this conversation, you and I are going to remain friends. Sure, I have all the respect for you in the world, even if we disagree on this point, and I'm not trying to rewrite generations of Tennessee policy and law or whatever during a 30-minute interview. It struck me, and I've stated it, and I'll just leave it be, that it struck me as odd that we would not give, and maybe the senators would be willing to do that. And I would encourage, if you have a senator and you want to know, I mean, obviously you do have a senator. If you want to know how they voted, contact their office and see if they'll let you know. And if they'll either will, and you can judge it from there, or they won't, and you can judge that individually as well.
I think that's very fair.
Let's talk about the city of Nashville. There's a lot of consternation about the Metro Council bill, although I note that while they are suing the state, they are moving forward with redrawing districts.
Redistricting, right.
Which gives me a real strong indication as to how they feel like they're going to fare in that. You've been real plain spoken about the hierarchy and all of this. At the same time, there was another bill that seemed to be punitive that's now DOA in the General Assembly, and that's the Convention Center bill. And I think that's a good thing. It felt punitive to me. Where were you on that bill?
Well, I was the sponsor of the bill. So, and the way it was drafted, you can, and to be clear, that bill was brought to me by the lieutenant governor, and the House Speaker had the House version of it, and he took it to someone as well. And as drafted, it was. I mean, if you read that bill as it was filed and drafted, well, number one, it wasn't workable what the plain language of that bill said, because it would lead to default of the bonds that were issued to build the convention center. And none of us want that.
Because right now they raise money based on those bonds to pay those bonds.
Exactly.
Through, conventions and the promotion of activities. Right. And the idea, for those who don't know, was it's kind of the general assembly. I don't want to mischaracterize it. You tell me if I am, Jack, but the idea was, okay, you don't want big money-generating conventions, fine, you don't get to collect your tax anymore.
Right. Well, and I absolutely acknowledge that one could read the bill as filed and come to that conclusion. One of the very first calls, I don't think it would mind me telling this, one of the first calls that I received once the bill was filed was from the comptroller of the Treasury of the state of Tennessee saying, Jack, what are you doing? This could result in them defaulting on these bonds. Nobody wants that. I think where we were going to try to get with the legislation, and we may still at a future time, is relative to misuse of some of those proceeds by Metro Nashville. We created a special tax zone so that they could collect sales tax and the money that's generated there to retire the debt that was issued to build the convention center and to have a fund to maintain it. And it's undeniable that Metro, the city of Nashville, was using some of those funds for other purposes, and we needed to get that under control.
The abortion bill, I think, has the fix bill, as I've been calling it. I believe it's passed the House. Mm-hmm. It's in the Senate. Mm-hmm. Have you reviewed it? And if so, are you comfortable with it?
I am. In fact, I signed on to it. And you've talked about it, and your audience knows this is a delicate issue. People have very strong feelings about different things. My position was, and this is where I think we ended up with the language that we have now, is to make any necessary clarifications for those in the medical community that when a patient presents, a woman presents, and she has a crisis pregnancy, that physician can take any and all steps necessary to save the life of the mother. I believe that's the intent. I believe that's what our trigger bill says that we have on the books now. I believe that's what it says. But some in the medical community have raised some concerns about some ambiguity in that language and wanted to make sure that was clarified. And that's where we've ended up now. The bill did come out of the Senate Judiciary Committee, probably have it on the floor next week. And once I saw where it was and that in fact is what it was doing. It's not opening it up for more abortions. It's simply clarifying the original intent of what we passed with the trigger bill. Then I was happy to sign on.
I mean, I believe that it's consistent with the opinion of the vast majority of Tennessee voters or Tennessee citizens, right? That while most Tennessee citizens are against abortion on demand, they recognize that in certain cases, when the life of the mother is in danger, the doctors in those cases need to be able to make the necessary medical decision.
100%. And they don't need to be going to call their lawyer to say, okay, here's the situation I have, and my best medical judgment, I believe that this mother's life. And keep in mind, I recognize, and I think anyone should, one physician may see it one way, another physician might see it another way. And that's okay. But if in their legitimate medical judgment, they believe they need to take an action and need to terminate a pregnancy because of whatever medical reason, it's jeopardizing the life of that mother, then they should be able to do so.
Do you think the characterization of the bill, and I've heard this from some, that it was weakening the abortion laws that would prevent abortion on demand in the state of Tennessee, do you think those were unfair?
Well, there were variations and there were drafts of amendments that were circulating that I think some in the pro-life community thought did exactly that. Mm-hmm. And that was a concern. And I shared that concern because I was completely fine with clarifying and strengthening what we have on the books now.
Well, it's similar in that way, follow me here, to the drag bill, what is now known as the drag bill, because that was a simple clarification as well that has been completely mischaracterized in some circles, liberal circles in Tennessee, and certainly outside of Tennessee, much like the Florida Don't Say Gay bill. Mm-hmm. I feel like Tennessee, we fell into that liberal trap as well. But I thought something that happened this week in the Senate kind of flies in the face of that narrative. It was a clarification bill, right? The one that passed and was signed by the governor. Right. Just clarifying that
you can't do obscene things in front of kids.
In front of kids.
Period.
That's it. There was a bill, I think Janice Bowling, no, wait, I might be wrong in that. I can't remember who sponsored it, but there was a bill that would have done what some of the liberal critics suggested we've already done, which was ban drag shows, ban adult cabaret, and that failed in the Senate.
It did. That bill did not advance. And true story, man, I've done lots of interviews on this, and I was with some news outlet, and they literally opened the interview. It was via Zoom, and the very first question, first of all, they showed some video of drag performers performing, not doing anything sexually explicit, just dancing and singing and whatever else. And the first question was, Tennessee passes legislation to ban drag shows. Senator Johnson, why did you think it was necessary to ban drag shows in Tennessee? And I went, I didn't. But that's not what the bill does.
It puts you in a weird position where, and I've known you since I've been here, you defend the legality of drag shows, which is probably not a place that you thought you would be.
Not a comfortable place for me necessarily, right. But that's right.
So the bill that would, quote unquote, ban drag shows failed in the Senate. Now, before we go, we've got a few minutes left. And I bring this conversation up because I want to watch your head explode. This is really just for me. 268. Is that not the digital monetization
money transmitter bill, the nightmare of all bills?
Right, because
the bill's fine, it's good, but just the way it's been mischaracterized.
Right, because there are a lot of people telling me that this is a conspiracy amongst the political left. Maybe the Federal Reserve is involved. I think the World Economic Forum and Davos is a part of it. And you, Jack Johnson, to digitize our money and somehow have the government take control of our bank accounts.
Yeah, completely misrepresenting what the bill does. The bills came to us from our Department of Financial Institutions, which simply says, we've got PayPal, Venmo, Cash App, Zelle, all these ways that you can send money to people in other countries. I send my kids money all the time using these apps. Mm-hmm. And there's very little oversight or regulation of some of these companies. And then there's some smaller, lesser known names that I don't know if they're on solid ground. So that's what the bill does, and it's the Association of Financial Commissioners across the nation came up with this model act, and that's what it deals with. But let me just put it this way: don't take my word for it. My dear friend William Lamberth, who you've had on the show, he's the House Majority Leader, so he was the sponsor. This came from the administration, so he and I were the sponsors. He had the great idea to go to the Beacon Center, which is an independent think tank that we all respect. I mean, they're nonpartisan, and they do great work. He had them review this bill and say, does this do anything to facilitate or advance an opportunity to establish central bank digital currency in the state of Tennessee? And they said, absolutely not. None whatsoever. There was another bill, we refer to it as the UCC bill, Uniform Commercial Code bill, that did create some current concerns legitimately, and that bill was taken off notice. I think some people have confused, and that's the bill that Kristi Noem vetoed in South Dakota. So it wasn't this bill.
Okay, so the Noem bill was the one that is gone.
That we did not even advance.
Jack, it's always a pleasure. It always goes by so fast. Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. I wish I could stick around and just listen to Representative Sapicki.
Oh, come on. He's going to bring the House side of things. He's going to tell us how everything you just said was wrong. No, I'm just kidding. The joke. Jack Johnson, thank you.
Thank you.
There's Senate Majority Leader Jack Johnson. Going to take a quick time out. Be back in a moment.